So friends, you'll have the opportunity in French and Italian to follow my words. If you don't need to read and you prefer to listen, that's wonderful too. You know, friends, we had a bit of an argument, a friendly argument. We each wanted the other to have the honor of giving this Devar Torah on this special joint Shabbat evening service. I said, Rabbi Francois must deliver the Devar Torah because he is my esteemed senior colleague. Gil is our esteemed parent community. But Rabbi Francois said, I must deliver the Devar Torah because he was more involved in the chanting of the prayers in the service, and it was only fair that I would do the Devar Torah. So you see who won the argument. I lost, but I won. I won the honor of sharing some thoughts with you on this wonderful joint Shabbat service. And it's also clear that when Beth Hillel and Gil will have our next joint Shabbat service, Bimhera b'yameinu, speedily in our days, Rabbi Francois will give the Devar Torah. Now, sometimes, depending upon the particular Parshat HaShavua, it's painfully difficult for a rabbi to find even one interesting theme to speak about. But this Shabbat is exactly the opposite. Tonight we have at least three wonderful themes. Today, as you know, is Rosh Chodesh Adar, the beginning of the Hebrew month of Adar, when according to the Talmud, when Adar enters, joy increases, referring, of course, to the holiday of Purim, which begins in less than 2 weeks on February 25th. Secondly, our weekly Torah portion this Shabbat is incredibly interesting. Parshat Mishpatim. It's known as the Book of the Covenant, our people's ancient law code, filled with laws and ordinances regulating nearly every aspect of life. But that's not all. This Shabbat is also known as Shabbat Shkalim, the first of 4 special Shabbatot, which always begins about or on the new moon of Adar. Every adult in the community 20 years old and above was commanded to pay a half shekel annual tax for the maintenance of the temple in Jerusalem. That tax was announced at the beginning of Adar. It would be announced today on Shabbat Shkalim, because you had 1 month to pay your tax. You had to pay before the Rosh Chodesh Nisan the next month. Oy vey, what do I do? So many important, wonderful themes. Which one to choose? But then I realized, why do I have to choose one? Why can't I find that hidden thread which connects all 3 of these themes? The joy of Adar, the mitzvot of Mishpatim, and the requirement to support the temple. So let's start with the connection between joy and law, joy and mitzvot, joy and obligation. But you'll say, aren't these 2 themes contradictory? Isn't joy something which gives us pleasure, while obligations are actions that we have to do? Isn't pleasure something we want with no limits? Unbridled joy, we say in English, without limit, without constraint. with no law or obligation to hold us back. But, my friends, joy without limit, without obligation, without taking into account the other, whether human beings or God, is not the way we Jewish people understand the meaning of joy. Judaism teaches us that joy is not an individual indulgence, but rather that which infuses life with meaning and purpose. We Jews speak about Simchat Torah, the joy of Torah and the commitment to honor the covenant with the divine. We rejoice in Judaism when we celebrate and observe the mitzvot, which help guide us towards purposeful living. Purposeful living. The holiday of Sukkot, for example, is called Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing, because the mitzvot associated with Sukkot remind us of our unique obligations to remember our history and responsibilities as a people on its own land. We rejoice in Judaism not so we can feel happy, but in order to appreciate a life of meaning. Let me say that again. We rejoice in Judaism not to be personally happy, but to help infuse life with meaning. But wait a minute, Rabbi Joel, somebody in the 100 plus in our congregation is saying right now, didn't you just teach us that joy increases in the month of Adar because we will soon be celebrating the holiday of Purim? And isn't the holiday of Purim when we Jews are supposed to go a little wild, to drink a little too much, to indulge in joy a little too much? You will never hear the words drink responsibly on Purim. And to that, I will answer, you just proved my point. Yes, indeed, there is one day a year when we Jews go wild with joy. We turn joy upside down. We turn joy into an individual indulgence, and that day is Purim. But just one day a year, my friends. The other 354 days of our lunar calendar, we are infusing joy with meaning, with limits, with obligation. Purim, in other words, is the exception to the rule, not the rule itself. And this leads me to the third theme that we want to connect with joy and obligation. And that is the theme of the annual tax we are commanded to give to the temple. Tonight, in other words, we send out the memo. Well, maybe not tonight. Let's say tomorrow night, Motzei Shabbat, we'll send out the memo, pay your synagogue dues and do so with joy, im simcha. Oh, come on, Rabbi Joel. You're asking us to pay our synagogue dues, our fees to Gil and our fees to Beth Hillel, and to do it joyfully? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Let me explain. For over 2,000 years, we Jews have been asked to take responsibility to support our communal center of worship and celebration. Thousands of years ago, it was the temple in Jerusalem. Today, it is the synagogue. Gil in Geneva, Beth Hillel in Rome, and thousands of other synagogues and temples throughout the world on World Union Shabbat. We think of all the 1,200 or more synagogues in the world. It was an obligation required equally of each adult in the community. It says in Shmot 30:15, the rich shall not pay more, and the poor shall not pay less than that half shekel. Now, why this condition? Because the temple was the inheritance of each and every Israelite, rich or poor, scholar or simple worker. There was one law for everyone. That is true democracy, and that is the gift that we Jews have given the world. When you are told to support the temple, it also means that your individual destiny becomes linked with the destiny of the entire nation. Paying that half shekel meant you committed yourself to a shared future with all the other Israelites in the community. You were not alone. You were not for yourself. That is happiness. But rather you were committed to your fellow human beings and your God, and that is the meaning of joy. So, my friends, are you expected even today, in the year 2021, to give your half shekel to the membership fees of the temple and to do so with joy? Yes, but keep in mind with inflation, that half shekel has grown to several hundred euros, if not more. But the fundamental expectation, that's the same. Each and every one of us, every Jew must contribute to sustain our center of worship and celebration, and that is the Beit Knesset, the synagogue. Now, just over 2 weeks ago, on January 27th, we observed the International Holocaust Memorial Day, commemorating 76 years since the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. For so many of us Jews living in Europe today, but all over the world, remembering the Shoah is a very personal matter. Our own family, our own friends were brutally murdered. Our Jewish future was in peril. Yet, here we are, smaller in number perhaps, still mourning our loss, but strong and determined in our commitment to continue our people's covenant with God, Torah, and Israel. What a blessing, what joy to be alive and be able to pay our half shekel contribution to sustain our GIL, our Beth Hillel today. Yes, over 2,000 years we have been commanded to do so, but for the past 76 years, we have 6 million more reasons to do so. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. Our God and God of our mothers and fathers, bless congregations GIL in Geneva, Beth Hillel in Rome, and all the World Union congregations throughout the world. Strengthen the hands and the hearts of each and every member whose commitment to sustain Jewish life brings honor to the memory of all those who came before us. Help us to understand, O Eternal Holy One, how to rejoice in the fulfillment of your mitzvot, so that not only the sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah, but all your creations shall live together in peace, in mutual respect, and none shall make them afraid. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.